Everybody. I'm going to start with consumer choice theory here. So let me just jump right into it. So consumer choice theory is a tool for economists to help describe the way that households allocate their limited budget through the means of purchasing goods and services that give them satisfaction. In simpler words, people demand things because those things make them happy, and they purchase that on account of their satisfaction from those goods. So anything from electricity to luxury items like NFL tickets, all these things make people happy, and that's why we purchase these goods and services. In econ, utility is best described as happiness, enjoyment, satisfaction. And at the base of the consumer choice theory is a unit of measurement called the util, which is a hypothetical measurement or number that we give to describe how much satisfaction we have in consuming a good or service. So, for instance, I'm going to talk about consuming Peeps, and that's what this chart's about. And so here I am with the first Peep, and I'm going to eat it so I can help you guys understand utility a little bit better. Go. So good. So I'm just going to give a hypothetical number to the amount of satisfaction that I have for enjoying this first Peep that I consume. And I'm going to give that number 10 utils, and that's under my marginal utility. That, in other words, marginal utility is the additional utils that I get from consuming an additional amount of Peeps. So from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, I get more marginal utility. And then here's total utility. That's obviously just all the utility added up from consuming, 2 or 3 goods. So suppose I were to have the second Peep. I'm not going to be very, happy, enjoy the second Peep as much as I did the first Peep, because we all know the first Peep is always better than the second Peep, which helps me describe the law of diminishing marginal utility. And the law of diminishing marginal utility states that, as each additional Peep I consume, marginal utility goes down, and I enjoy that item a lot less. And even at 4, I get down to 0 marginal utility, which means that I have no satisfaction in enjoying the fourth Peep that I consume. And then when I get down to 5, I have a negative marginal utility. I have negative 4 utils, which means that I loathe having that fifth Peep because they're starting to get really disgusting, and I'm not really liking them anymore because I've had so many today. But as you can see, what happens to the total utility as marginal utility changes. First, you add all the numbers up, and that gives you your total utility. But as you get to 4, total utility stays constant when I consume my fourth Peep, because I get 0 marginal utility. And then when I get down to negative 4, my total utility actually goes down. So, as you can see, this is just a brief explanation of utility in a nutshell.
Because consumers have a limited amount of resources to spend on utility, they make their choices based on a product's utility per dollar. If a product has a high utility and low cost, then they'll spend more money and buy more of that product. Likewise, if a product has a high cost and low utility, they'll spend less money and buy less of the product. This tendency is called law of demand. The law of demand can be described as the inverse relationship between the quantity demanded of a good and the price of the good. To further explain the law of demand, we need to know the substitution effect, the income effect, and the law of diminishing marginal utility. The income effect is the idea that lowering the price of a good will allow the consumer to buy more of it. This increases their purchasing power. For example, let's say I have only $2, and the price of soda is also $2. So in that case, I can only buy 1 soda. Now let's say soda goes on sale for $1. This increases my purchasing power. It allows me to buy 2 instead of 1. Now, the substitution effect is the idea that the consumer will purchase the cheaper of 2 similar goods. For example, let's say I have Coke and Pepsi, and that Coke is only $1. But Pepsi is $2. In this instance, I could buy 2 Cokes instead of 1 Pepsi.
Okay, so the principal thing that firms do is that they take in something and then they make something else. So let's pretend that this is your firm right here. It takes in something, it processes it, and then it puts out something else. Now we call this the input in economics terms, the resources, and the output, the products. And this entire system is called production. Now it's not that simple. There are costs associated with the resources, and there are benefits associated with the products. So we can divide these up into 2 kind of broad ideas. So for resources, we have these things called variable resources. In that as a company or a firm grows, it needs to use more of these things. So let's say that I decide to make some lemonade. I open a lemonade stand. As I make more lemonade, I need to buy more sugar and more lemonade and more water. So that would be an example of a variable resource. Now variable resources cost money, so under that you have variable costs. So if the other type of cost, like resource, is that doesn't increase as you scale up in production, we call those fixed resources. So in this lemonade example, it would be like the actual stall that I'm using. So no matter how many people come to the lemonade stand, I wouldn't have to make another stand. So it's a fixed resource. Fixed resources have fixed costs attached to them. Now, if you take all of these costs together, you get total cost, which is exactly what it sounds like. Now, the way that we think about these in terms of of graphs and such is we use the per unit versions of these costs. So we have variable cost, which is the total amount that you're spending at a certain level, at a certain quantity. You also have average variable costs, you have average fixed costs, and you have average total costs. Now, beyond all of these, you have the best little cost of them all, which is the marginal cost. So the marginal cost is kind of like the variable cost in the fact that it scales up with production, but more specifically, it's the amount that the extra amount necessary as you increase output by 1. So let's say it takes, I don't know, $10 to make 0 lemonades. It takes $12 to make 1 lemonade. So here the marginal cost will be 1 because of the difference that it takes to increase these by 1. So that's pretty good. Now on the flip side, we have the products that are created from production. There you have, first of all, there's the actual physical thing that you're making, the total product. There is the average product, which is the amount, the amount of product you take by the amount of output. And there is the marginal product, which is similar to the marginal cost, that in fact that it's the additional product that you make. So it would be that 1 lemonade from back then. Now the marginal product is special because it has a dollar value attached to it. So if 1 lemonade costs $3, then my marginal benefit from making that one lemonade would be $3. We have this marginal benefit. And these are all, this is basically production in a nutshell. Okay, so there are two systems that we can use to examine like the way that different markets work. So we can either consider them in the short run or in the long run. Now what does this mean? So in the short run, there is at least one fixed resource. And so usually it just occurs shorter, like in a shorter period of time. So in my lemonade stand example, this would be the fact that I have a lemonade stand. And in the next year or so, I'm going to continue having this lemonade stand. But when you think about this in the long run, I mean, maybe 20 years time, I could open a lemonade factory, maybe take over the world using my lemonade. So the difference between these two is that, first of all, since there's a fixed resource, we can draw in an AFC curve, so an average fixed cost curve. And since there's also marginal resources, we can have an AVC curve. Now the thing about like this is that there's an average total cost curve, which is the really important one. Just that. So the distance between these two curves over here, is the same as this average fixed cost because that doesn't change. But there is a fixed cost. Now when we think about this in the long run, the way that we graph this is that we just take all of the average ATC curves over the course of the company's lifetime, and we just plot it down. So we have it there when the company is relatively new. We have another one over here, and then eventually the company keeps on getting bigger, and at this point it gets too big, and Byzantine and costs begin to increase again. So we can kind of just divide this up into three parts. So we have this area where growing decreases costs. And that's because of the law of marginal, like you mentioned, marginal returns, like specialization and whatnot. But over here you have economies of scale, and so that means if you scale up production by a constant C, then you get more than that constant out, so you get greater than C. Over here, you have kind of a little flat area where you have like let's say you have a moderately sized company, and here, by scaling up production by C, you get C. So if I double production, I get double output. Now, over here, you have a period where the company is too large to function. It's too large to function efficiently. I mean, you can still get bigger, but getting bigger doesn't do as much good as it used to. Where scaling production up by C gets you less than C. So this part we call economies of scale. Because scaling is good. Over here we have constant returns to scale. Because you get constant returns to scale. And over here you have diseconomies of scale. Because it is the opposite of economies of scale. And so that's long run and short run cost curves.